Chapter 3 Two Tomcats and a Gunny Sack. I was filling glasses with ice water in the dining room, but I could hear Aunt Queenie talking to her father. Sell the house, she was saying. You won't have to worry about the yard work and taxes and repairs. Worrying about that house is a dang sight better than having a full-time babysitter, he countered. Eat this, drink that, take your medicine. I haven't had a minute's peace since I walked in the door. Pop, you called me in the middle of the night, scared you were having a stroke. After that, you wanted to move in here with us. Thought I was dying, Queen. A man doesn't want to die alone. I don't want you to die, period. So why are you pampering me to death? Because you need someone to look after you. I chewed my lower lip. Would it have been so hard to say, because I love you, Pop? Maybe she didn't love him. I thought fathers and daughters were supposed to love each other, no matter what. But Aunt Queenie and Mr. Roebuck were like two tomcats in a gunny sack. It was all so confusing. How could you love someone yet be so abrasive all the time? Maybe what we had here was a paradox. I'd found that word in my vocabulary book, and I liked the sound of it. Paradox. Something that seems to contradict itself. What if the link connecting Aunt Queenie and her father wasn't love at all? What if he was here because his only other choice was the old folks' home? What if she was taking care of him out of a sense of responsibility? As I poured the last of the ice water, I suddenly felt cold myself. What if this was the only reason she was taking care of me? Mr. Roebuck shuffled in and glowered at the table. Always eating off of china, he muttered, like a bunch of dad-blam sissies. I'm not a sissy, I'm a shyster, said Uncle Bert, and I couldn't help smiling. What you grinning at, girlie? Asked Mr. Roebuck as he sat down across from me. Girlie? Yuck. Nothing, I mumbled, and took my seat. I didn't want to meet his eyes, didn't want to see his perpetual frown, but somehow I couldn't help it. My gaze caught his like a magnet drawing metal, and his eyes were cold blue still. I swallowed nervously. The smell of pot roast, so tantalizing earlier, now made me dread the fireworks that would come after it. I decided to eat fast and excuse myself before dessert. Uncle Bert asked the blessing, then served up slices of pot roast. Just a small one for me, I said. What? Squawked Aunt Queenie. This from the girl who dreams of red meat? I'm sorry. Guess I'm excited about tonight, I said, knowing now I'd have to stick around for the pie. Aunt Queenie spoke to the ceiling. I declare if I make it through these next few years, it'll be a miracle. You'll survive, said Mr. Roebuck. Your mother and I did. Aunt Queenie clicked her lavender nails on the table. And just what is that supposed to mean? Nothing, Queen. Forget it. No, I won't. I was a quiet girl, Pop. We didn't live in one place long enough for me to make a lot of friends and be a normal teenager. That's not the time I'm talking about. It was later. Later? When you met him, said Mr. Roebuck, jerking his head toward Uncle Bert. He was too young. You were robbing the cradle. That struck a nerve. Aunt Queenie made a strangling noise, and her rouged cheeks blossomed a deep rose red. Orvis, barked Uncle Bert, that old horse was beaten to death 12 years ago when we got married, and I won't stand for you bringing it up again. The old man held his hands in front of him as if to ward off blows. Hey, Bert, don't get excited. Queen's mother was upset by the age difference, but it didn't bother me a bit. Forget I mentioned it. Uncle Bert glared at him for a few seconds, then served himself some roast. Aunt Queenie had regained her composure. Passing a bowl to her father, she said, Save some room for pie, Pop. It's your favorite. Didn't ask for no pie, the old man replied as he shoveled mashed taters into his plate. I did ask that you stay out of my room. Don't want you in there going through my things. I didn't go through your things. I simply tidied up. Mr. Roebuck jammed the spoon into the potatoes and thrust the bowl at me. Then he pointed a finger at his daughter. You messed with my duffel bag. Knocked it over. From now on, I'm stashing it away where you won't have to look at it. That's fine with me, said Aunt Queenie. It's practically a rag. Well, it's my rag, muttered Mr. Roebuck, and I want you to leave it alone. I couldn't bear their arguing all the way through dinner, so I said the only thing I could think of. Aunt Queenie, Evanel's mom was able to shorten the sleeves on that shirt. Aunt Queenie, Avenel's mom wasn't able to shorten the sleeves on that shirt. If she cut the thread that holds the sequins, they'd have come unstrung. Uncle Bert stopped chewing to stare at Aunt Queenie. You gave away your sequin shirt? I did. It's been hanging in the closet for 3 years. I haven't touched it since the garden club threw that New Year's Eve party. But you were beautiful in that shirt. Why, I declare, Bert, said Aunt Queenie, blushing to the roots of her straw blonde hair. You could have told me before. It's too late now. It would hurt Avenel's pride if I asked for it back. It probably would, he agreed, and that family's already had too many blows to its pride. It's the father's fault, said Orvis Roebuck. Hard-working citizens had to support his family while he served time in prison. I dropped my fork and it clattered on my plate. Please don't ever say that to Avenel. She doesn't need someone throwing that prison business in her face. I know that, girlie. I don't blame her. Pop, you're being too judgmental, said Aunt Queenie. Mr. Shackelford served several months for a crime he didn't commit. Gardenia didn't like living on welfare, but she had no choice, not with 7 children and one of them a new baby. Mr. Roebuck ignored her. There's no justice in this world, he went on. Those kids have got a dad they can't depend on, and the girlie here doesn't have one at all. It don't seem right to me. I stared into my water glass. I'd had the same thought a time or two, right after my parents were killed, and I still felt ashamed of it. But the old man had his nerve saying such a thing. He didn't care whether I had a dad or not. He just didn't like me living in this house. Gardenia and the kids are a fine family, said Uncle Bert, and my impression of Trezane is that he is a good man. He was in church the first Sunday after his parole, and he's looking for work. That could be a struggle in a town like Tanglenook, Missouri, because guilty or not, he's got a criminal record. Employers might be leery of hiring him. I would if it were me, said Mr. Roebuck. Well, I declare, Pop, said Aunt Queenie, you're behaving like a typical old goat. My eyes popped. She disapproved of Punky and Uncle Bert using that term, and here she was using it herself. Orvis Roebuck must be pushing her over the edge. I just call him like I see him, he said. I turned to Uncle Bert.
Pick up some bus riders for bus 1.
You help Mrs. Shackelford find that house to rent, and you shame the landlord into fixing the place up. Maybe you could help Mr. Shackelford find a job. I doubt it. I can hire him now and then to paint a house before I put it on the market. Beyond that, there's not much I can do. When Aunt Queenie got up to serve the pie, I poured coffee for the grown-ups. As soon as we were seated, she shook out her linen napkin and said, Pop, Bert and I have something to discuss with you. Orvis Roebuck grunted. Sounds serious. Whatever's on your mind, just spit it out. Spit, as in tobacco juice. Forcing myself not to think of that, I took a bite of pie. Aunt Queenie said, all families have problems, and we've got a truckload of them, interrupted her father. For one, a man can't have his privacy. I'm going to stick a sign on my door. Stay out of my room and leave my gear alone. Don't be ridiculous, Orvis, said Uncle Bert. Queenie has every right to go in there and clean. Mr. Roebuck scowled at him. I can run a sweeper and make a bed. I did it at home. How often did you change the sheets, Pop? Asked Aunt Queenie. When I thought about it. What difference does it make? Nobody slept on them but me. She winced in disgust. Get used to it, Pop. I'll be cleaning your room and changing your sheets once a week. I will, however, leave your duffel bag untouched. Aunt Queenie sipped her coffee, replaced the cup in the saucer, and plucked the pencil from her top knot. Okay, Pop, she said. I've listened to your complaints. Now you listen to mine. I know it's difficult for you living in a home that's not your own. I've tried to be patient, but my patience is wearing thin. You seem to have lost your sense of pride, and some of your habits have given me pause. Given you pause? Mr. Roebuck snorted. What kind of talk is that? There's nothing wrong with my habits. Queen, you've always been a prissy little thing, and now you're getting worse. Have you forgotten that this is retired Master Sergeant Orvis Roebuck here, not some snotty-nosed kid? I laid down my fork, because with all this talk about spit and snot, I felt like throwing up. So where's the man who once presented such a fine figure in uniform? Prodded Aunt Queenie. Where's the man who provided for Mama and me and treated us with respect? Where's the man who came home with medals from World War II? That's the very subject we were studying in history class. We won that war in spite of Mr. Roebuck. He narrowed his eyes at Aunt Queenie. You know nothing about World War II, he said. You weren't even born yet. I've seen your pictures and the medals, too. Don't want to talk about that. That's your choice, Aunt Queenie twiddled the pencil between her fingers, and my eyes met Uncle Bert's. We nodded at each other, almost imperceptibly. A jiggling pencil meant both barrels were loaded and ready to fire. Now, about those habits, Pop, stabbing the pencil at the table, Aunt Queenie ticked off her grievances. Whiskers on the sink, splatters on the toilet seat, lit off the sugar bowl, spitting on the porch. Mr. Roebuck's face was a glob of whiskers and puckers and bulging eyes. He slammed down his fist and the dishes rattled. Queen, I made a career out of defending this country. I've given orders to soldiers and taken orders from my superiors, and I'll be dad blamed if I'll start taking orders from a daughter who's 26 years younger than I am. The pencil dropped from Aunt Queenie's hand and pinged against her coffee cup. She glanced quickly at me, then at Uncle Bert, her face a mask of shock. I did some quick mental calculations. If Mr. Roebuck was 74 and she was 48, 15 years older than Uncle Bert. After a couple of heartbeats, Aunt Queenie picked up the pencil and tapped it on the table. Smooth as silk, she said. I hardly think asking someone to be neat about his person is giving orders, but call it what you will. When I was a child, you told me I would follow your rules as long as I lived in your house. The circumstances are different, but the rules are the same. You'll behave like a gentleman as long as you live in my house." Mr. Roebuck burst into a coughing fit, which I suspected was deliberate, so he'd have time to think. When he had control of himself again, he croaked, "Supposing I clean up after myself a little better, Queen, will you do something for me?" "What's that?" He scooted back in his chair and clambered to his feet. "Loosen up and stop acting like a dad-blammed old maid schoolmarm with her underwear in a twist." Aunt Queenie gasped and her father stomped out of the room. "Why, I just declare," Aunt Queenie inserted the pencil in her hair with enough force to flatten a tire, then flounced away from the table. Uncle Bert sat glaring in the direction of his father-in-law. "Ungrateful old coot," he said, clenching and unclenching his hands on the tablecloth. "I'd set him up in his own little apartment if I could, but I can't. We're his family. We're all he's got left." The dab of food I'd eaten lay heavy in my stomach. How I wished I could roll back the clock, clear back to September, when family meant having Mom and Dad and Punky.